Hello, friends, and welcome to day 375 of Quarantine Corner. Here to regale you with a tale. And not just any tale, mind you. This is quite the tale. So I was deciding what I wanted to do tonight. And I was poking around looking for some ideas. And I saw that in this day in history was actually the Battle of New Orleans. And there was a really dopey song about that. Fireworks when the British came a-running around the Gulf of Mexico, down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. In 1814, it took a little trip, Jackson, Mississippi. Anyhow, it's a wretched song. So I didn't consider doing that song, but I did start looking into the Battle of New Orleans, and I found a very interesting thing about it. It was really the tail end of the War of 1812, which was a really pretty nasty war. We don't know much about it these days, but the British were just really pissed about the whole revolution thing, and they had this nasty habit of stopping American ships in the middle of the ocean and basically snatching all the sailors and pressing them into service in the British Navy. And they kept doing that over and over. I mean, thousands and thousands of people over the course of time. Anyhow, War of 1812. And they actually had signed a treaty called the Treaty of Ghent, which settled the whole thing, but the news hadn't gotten to the States yet, and the British didn't really care anyhow. They wanted to see if they could still win the war even after the treaty being signed. So they went ahead and mounted this attack, and it was quite a big event and went over quite a period of time. I don't want to forget that our dear friend on here, Barbara, is suffering mightily. She's pretty sick. She's got bronchitis. Anyhow, so don't know if she's watching, but definitely want to send her some love. Didn't want to forget that. Anyhow, so the Battle of New Orleans actually was fought after the War of 1812 had ended. But that's not the important part. The important part is the Americans had dug themselves into this embankments, and they had like major artillery and all kinds of stuff. They had built up these huge earthworks embankments, and they had dug this canal that was 8 feet deep and 15 feet across in front of it, like a dry moat, to prevent anybody from wheeling anything up to the embankment. So when the British wanted to take that, of course, what they used were these long ladders. And they would take these ladders and ladder-like things and lay them across the canal and then pick them up and put them on the embankment so that they could scale up the embankment. And the whole forces go there. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of people and all this sort of stuff. But there was a guy, Thomas Mullins. So just in case you think you have had a bad day or things aren't going your way, just remember Thomas Mullins. It was his job to bring the ladders, and also what the things were called were fascines. It was his job to bring them, and he forgot them. He just forgot them. And they arrived there, and it was like, whoops, whoopsie, although they probably said it with British accents. Anyhow, so for his trouble, he was court-martialed after the fact, and wasn't just court-martialed, he was cashiered from the army. This is not something that we hear about. Hey, Donnie, something that we don't hear about often these days, but we remember it, old farts that we are, because of a black and white TV show starring Chuck Connors, where the drums start, and there he is in his army uniform, and the guy comes up to him, and he takes his hat, throws it off, and rips the epaulets off of his jacket, pulls off the buttons one by one, and then takes his sword, that's ostensibly steel, and breaks it over his knee like a child's toy. And that show, of course, was Branded. That's what being cashiered out of the army is, and that's what they did to this guy. The whole full regalia and everything, and they strip off the stuff off of his uniform and everything. So that's what happened to Thomas Mullins. So don't forget your fascines, is the moral of this story. Anyhow, At the beginning of this, I only had 4 people watching, and I've lost one because I guess they don't like history lessons. But anyhow, so it prompted me to remember that great song from that show, Branded. And, of course, somebody will beat me to it, and will go ahead and post, the YouTube video of it, because if you don't, I will. Anyhow, so I'm going to do not only the intro, but also the back half of the song that ran over the credits. It's almost in tune. All but one man died there at Bitter Creek, and they said he ran away, branded, marked with a coward shame. What do you do when you're branded? Will you fight for your name? He was innocent, not a charge was true, but the world would never know. Branded, scorned as the one who ran. What do you do when you're branded and you know you're a man? Wherever you go for the rest of your life, you must prove you're a man. Stripped of all his rank, stripped of all his pride, still he held his head up high. I got through that line. Held his head up high. I was scared about that. Branded, friends are a thing unknown. What do you do when you're branded? Can you go on alone? Of his General Reed and the men who died, he can never speak the truth. Branded, that's not the way to die. What do you do when you're branded? Can you live with a lie? Wherever you go for the rest of your life, you must prove you're a man. Branded! So, I didn't look into the background to see if General Reed and the men who died, but I guess that was the deal at Bitter Creek. So somebody might want to look into that and give us a report about General Reed at Bitter Creek. All but one man died there at Bitter Creek. And he had to prove he was a man. Anyhow, so that's the fortuitous path that took me to singing the song Branded. It all started with the Battle of New Orleans. Wound its way through that poor schmuck Thomas Mullins. God, what a yo-ho. You know, that's like those kind of things. You got one job. Just one job. That's it. One job. It reminds me of a camping trip I took once with a group of loadouts to the Ocala National Forest. Now, the Ocala National Forest has no facilities whatsoever. I mean, it's just naked Florida forest. So, everybody had a different responsibility. And there was a guy, I think his name was Brian, and I think people called him Fryin' Brian for good reason. And he was the one responsible for bringing liquids. We were going into the woods for 3 days, and we said, okay, you bring all the liquids. What he brought was like 10 cases of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. No water. No water. Just Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. And so for 3 days and 2 nights, we brushed our teeth with, had our breakfast with, poured it in our cereal. What we had was Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. And that's why to this day, I just can't drink Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. And that was 45, 48 years ago, something like that. Yeah, liquids indeed. But as it happened, we didn't much care because we also had with us a big old bag of mushrooms. And they weren't portobellos, if you know what I mean. So